Hi, my name is Mackenzie Tolliver. I chose this theory because I'm a psychology major, so I've learned a lot about psychopathy in some of my other classes. I chose hate crimes because I think they are something that are really relevant right now. It's kind of on a rise. They've happened a lot more recently than in the past, so I thought it was something that's really important to do research on. Besides being interesting, it's just something that I think everybody should be aware of.
Hello, my name is Danielle Garner, and I chose this theory because I am into psychopaths and hate crimes. Psychopaths, I want to see their motives and their biases and dig deep and see why they commit the crimes that they commit and why do they commit these crimes based upon biases. Um, my interest peaked because I have a minor in psychology. So as I begin to study more with psychology, a lot of things starts to answer my questions being with the mind, studying the mind. Hate crimes is a growing problem in the United States, and I want to learn more about this as I continue on with this project.
I'm Kadejah Adams, and I chose these topics because it's interesting to see how the two intersect. And my interest in psychopathy allows me to delve deeper into the theory and learn more about hate crimes at the same time.
My name is Vivian Poston, and I chose this topic because I'm a criminal justice major and I really enjoy the criminality aspect of this research project. This research topic highlights how prevalent hate crime is in our society today. This was a great opportunity for me to have a better understanding of what really motivates criminals that are involved in hate crimes specifically. I think it's very important to have a better understanding of criminals and why they may engage in criminal activity. In this research project, it was interesting because I was able to learn about the internal influences on a criminal, such as their mental health. This topic allowed me to have a better understanding of hate crimes and psychopathy individually and the correlation between the two topics.
My name is Levine, and I chose to research this topic because as I have been educated in the criminal justice system, hate crimes have become a growing interest. I also thought that since this is a growing topic within the United States, I would love to be able to educate myself more when talking about this topic, especially to other people.
Hi, I'm Marissa. I picked the topic hate crimes and psychopathy because I'm a criminal justice major and a psychology major, and I find the comparisons between psychological disorders and violence to be something I'm very interested in. And I want to be a forensic psychologist, so this was a great topic for me to pick.
Hi, I'm Morgan Byrum. I'm a sophomore and a criminal justice major. One of the main reasons I got into criminal justice was because of hate crimes. So learning how a theory like psychopathy relates to hate crimes is pretty interesting and the reason why I chose this topic.
My name is Georgious, and I chose this topic because, like a lot of other people in this group, I am also a psychology major, and I'm pretty interested in the psychology of individuals who commit crimes. And this was pretty much the only topic that included a theory that had its primarily psychological approach, which is why I chose it. And I also thought it would be an interesting challenge to examine how a crime can be considered to have hate as a motive when the individual feels emotions in an abnormal way.
Hate crimes are defined by the 1990 Hate Crime Statistic Act as crimes that manifest evidence of prejudice based on race, religion, sexual orientation, or ethnicity. In 1994, it added offenses motivated by bias against those with disabilities, and in 2009, added offenses based on gender or gender identity as well. For it to count in the NCVS, there must be one of three types of evidence: hate language, hate symbols, or police confirmation that it was a hate crime.
Hate crimes is basically an offense like murder, arson, or vandalism with a particular bias connected to it. So, if a person has committed this crime based upon against any person, business, or property, it's considered a hate crime stated by the FBI. This can go against race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, and gender identity.
Some examples of hate crimes include the killing of James Byrd Jr. in 1998. James Byrd Jr. was an African American man who accepted a ride home from three white men. Instead of taking him home, they beat him, took off his clothes, chained him naked to the back of their truck, and dragged him to his death. In that same year of 1998, Matthew Shepard was a gay man who was 21 years old. He accepted a ride, and instead of being taken home, he was driven to a remote area, tied to a fence, beaten within an inch of his life, and left to die. These were both killings in 1998 that were done strictly based off of the victim's race and sexual orientation. These are two cases that really brought hate crimes into national attention, which we see with the Shepard-Byrd Act, which enhanced punishment for crimes motivated by hate in hope to deter hate crimes. These are both clearly coming from the deaths of James Byrd Jr. and Matthew Shepard. In more recent times, Nicholas Prophet was a man who, in 2009, pled guilty to a hate crime after throwing rocks at the Islamic Center in Missouri. 11 years later, in 2020, he came back to that same place and set it on fire. He was then arrested and charged with burglary, arson, and property damage motivated by discrimination, all in the first degree. Obviously, these are three of the many, many, many hate crimes that occur in the United States, and they're just a small representation of what really happens. And the Shepard-Byrd Act is just one example of the many policy implications that have came from these hate crimes.
A psychopath is defined as a thrill-seeking and predatory individual with a callous lack of concern for others. Psychopaths tend to lack empathy and are unable to feel remorse. They also have poor behavioral controls. Robert Hare developed the Psychopathy Checklist Revised, or the PCLR, which measures two factors. The first factor being the callous, selfish, remorseless use of others, and the second being a chronically and antisocial lifestyle. According to Cleckley, there are two subgroups of psychopathy. The first being the primary psychopath, which have characteristics that are maladaptive and pathological, as well as key traits that appear seemingly adaptive. The second group is the secondary psychopath, which have the same maladaptive traits as primary, but exhibits extensive symptoms of psychological turmoil and emotional reactivity. Lycan suggested the low fear quotient, which says that primary psychopaths are at the low end of the fear quotient because they are not afraid of punishment. Psychopathic individuals that act impulsively without assessing the situation is due to an inhibitory defect. This means that there are lesions in certain areas of the brain that cause decrease in inhibitory control and makes the individual dangerous, which is why a psychopath is one of the most dangerous individuals you can ever meet.
So applying the theory to the crime. So one important thing to understand is that psychopaths are looking for something that is going to pique their interest. They are extreme thrill seekers, and this is why when they choose to commit their crime, they seek out people who appear or are vulnerable at the time. It's easier for these people to commit these crimes because they don't hesitate before inflicting pain or damaging property. The display of hatred is linked with sanctions and consequences. Since psychopathic individuals are not concerned with legal sanctions or societal rules, it might make sense that they would have no hesitation to display their feelings of hate.
Okay, so moving on to where the theory falls short, I read this interesting study about behavioral scripts in psychopathic individuals. And basically what it said is that psychopathic individuals are able to identify scripts of love, hate, anxiety, etc., by examining the positive and negative effects that lead up to a specific emotion. For example, positive events leading up to loving emotions. So for normal people, their representation of hate is that they have a negative image of the object of hate. However, psychopathic individuals do not necessarily attribute negative characteristics to the object of hate. Instead, they perceive their personal characteristics as extremely positive. So the object of hate is inferior to them, but not because it has negative attributes. And it also said that psychopathic individuals cannot identify the causes that lead to feelings of hate and hostility, and their opinions of hate are often generalized, which makes it difficult for psychopaths to describe actions that are typical of hatred. So the way it would not apply to this crime is that a psychopath might commit a crime and involve hate language or symbols which would classify it as a hate crime, but they might be unaware that these actions are considered hate towards the victim. And it would be hard to prove that a psychopathic individual would committed a crime that is motivated by hate, because their idea of hate is different than a normal person, and their reason for hating something was most likely because of their sense of superiority. And another way that a crime committed by a psychopath might be mistaken as a hate crime is that psychopaths will not hesitate to inflict pain on someone, so they might go overkill when they attack someone or damage property, and the overkill could be mistaken for rage that comes from hate when it really isn't hate that motivates the crime.
What is missing from the theory that could describe the crime better? The theory does not acknowledge external influences on the psychopathic individual, such as how the hate could have been formed. Psychopaths develop hate based on personal feelings of superiority and when they feel that their ego is quote-unquote challenged. The theory should discuss external factors such as the extent a psychopath individual is willing to go to express their hate. The theory could analyze what makes one feel entitled to follow through with a physical action compared to verbal prejudices. If this theory went into more detail about the length of the hate and the extent to which a psychopath will succumb to, could be an advantage for the targeted individual and or group of people during legal proceedings, then individual could not automatically plead for mental insanity.